Hi, I'm Dr. Gwen, and my channel is all about creating content that empowers the neurodiverse community. In this episode, Shannon Iacobacci comes onto the show to teach us about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, its misconceptions and stigmas, and how we can help individuals and families who are affected by FASD. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am thrilled to welcome Shannon Iacobacci. Yes, I did it, Shannon. FASD specialist, and more importantly, a mom. That's where the cred is, Shannon. That's where the cred is right there. Not that I'm going to diminish the education that you're putting yourself through right now, but I think being a mom is really, really the deep cellular heart stuff that, it's hard to simulate and replace. Anyway, Shannon, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here because, girl, I got a lot to learn. And when I found out that my knowledge of FASD, and we'll get into this audience, is old. I mean, like, just off camera, as I was talking to Shannon before we started recording, my knowledge about FASD is old, and I'm stuck in, other types of, preconceived or misconceptions that I was trained in, but I've changed. So let's just start. Shannon, you are the specialist. You're the expert. So what is FASD? Let's just start there.
Okay. So FASD stands for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, and it is an umbrella term for multiple neurodiverse conditions that are associated with alcohol consumption during pregnancy. And so it is a spectrum, and the FASD umbrella does fall underneath the all-encompassing neurodiversity umbrella. Okay, so it's a sub-umbrella, so to speak. And medical diagnoses might be things such as PAE, or prenatal alcohol exposure, or ARND, alcohol-related neurobehavioral, like ARNB, ARN, that type of thing, and many, many more. And so what happens is when a fetus is developing in utero, if alcohol is consumed during pregnancy at any point in time, even sometimes during conception or preconception, there's a potential of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, because it does change the brain structure and function of the developing fetus.
Got it. Thank you. I mean, I was still calling it FAS. I was still calling it fetal alcohol syndrome. And my dear Shannon was like, well, Gwen, actually. And this is why you're on the show, right, Shannon? It's like, I need to learn, and I'm sure, and I'm involved in the neurodiverse community. And this part has been, for me, left aside. I mean, I need this. So selfishly, I'm so glad you're here. Shannon, what types of, symptoms functionally do we see? So, when we talk about, like, autism spectrum disorder, we know in general, not that you meet someone with autism, you meet everyone with, you've met everyone with autism, because it's a spectrum, right, disorder. Correct. As well. And this is fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So there's a variability to the way someone's looking. But in general, what are some of the core areas of difficulties or symptoms like that we see?
Yes. So, and you're right that being that it's a spectrum, based on the timing that alcohol is introduced to the developing fetus and the amount, is going to impact the severity of the changes or the neurodiversity, and also different parts of the brain and central nervous system based on the timing of development as it's developing.
Mm.
So some of the things we may see, some of the most common are executive functioning. We're going to see executive functioning deficits, emotional regulation. That is a huge one. The ability um, to contain our impulse controls, or so a lot of times what persons may see may be behaviors that are a manifestation of the disability, because there's no ability to regulate those emotions. And you can see there may be some cognitive flexibility deficits. There's potential sensory, which that is actually very common with the autism spectrum as well,
Mm-hmm.
sensory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we may see motor challenges, memory for sure, long-term retrieval, or even short-term retrieval. Sometimes we see confabulation because of memory.
Mm-hmm.
Confabulation, for your audience, just in case, just for knowledge, is it looks like lying. It seems like it's lying, but they're actually filling in the blanks to make sense for themselves, because there's missing information. There could be a slow processing speed. Language can be affected, cause and effect reasoning, the inability to generalize. So, or to be able to take learned skills in one environment and transfer them to another. That can be a difficult potential for this individual. Also, abstract thinking can be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Who decided that the dime is worth more than the nickel and it's smaller? Like, think about that, or our language is abstract. Math
Yep.
can be abstract. So there's so many different things, but it's important to note that it is a spectrum and no two individuals are going to be impacted the same. So though I can give you a list, and there's many more, areas of the brain that can be impacted, it's important to note that not all individuals will be impacted in all areas, and no two individuals are going to be alike. So there's really going to be no cookie cutter approach to helping this population.
Yep. Yep. And the good news is that there is help.
There is
Because
help.
there is help. I mean, as you're talking about the challenges that we might see,
Mhm.
right? And I really think about, we've got a brain that's developing in a different way that we might anticipate in the neuromajority, right?
Correct.
So the majority of people. And it's like a little bit of this, but a lot of that, but none of this, and some of that. It's like, this is why this variability, and no one person looks the same,
Right.
but that if we understand that FASD is a spectrum disorder, right? So now we got to pay attention to the individual characteristics of the person,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
We understand how this happened in regards to why the brain developed in this way.
Correct.
Right? So this isn't a genetic load.
No, epigenetics do come into play as well.
Okay.
And that's
Yep.
what muddies the waters.
Yes. Okay.
And
Yeah.
it does make diagnosing very challenging for this
Okay.
population. There are so many misdiagnoses, or comorbid diagnoses that take place, because it is a complicated disability, and so it's
Yeah.
often masked in other areas. And so individuals may be first diagnosed with ADHD, and then they recognize that the typical ADHD interventions are ineffective. And so now what? Okay, well, this person has, maybe it's autism. And then we go
Mm-hmm.
through all the autism, those are two very common misdiagnoses with
I can
FASD,
see. Yeah, I can
right?
see this. Yeah.
Right. And then there's, okay, well, let's add these mental health conditions on, because this is what happens when the person's, like it's almost an adverse outcome that takes place. So it makes the genetics and epigenetics, there has been research that genetics do come into play and that there can be a genetic link that takes place as well. And so it's very
Wow.
interesting about the research that's taken place in regards to that. So yeah, it does.
Wow. So it's almost like, yeah, it's almost like the genetics provide that kind of landscape, and then something gets triggered. So alcohol might trigger something, and
Right,
there we have an expression. So the
right.
alcohol is what serves to express that gene early on in development. In or not. Oh my gosh.
No,
This is
not necessarily expressing the gene. It's more of, because alcohol is the teratogen, right? So
yeah.
when it develops a brain, when it's introduced, and the developing brain is, developing like a cauliflower, right? It's developed
Yep.
from the brain stem top to the top. So when it's based on when it's introduced, it's going to basically attack the glial cells, the scaffolding, all of the things that are in the structure. So if you think of, say, a block wall, if you're building a block wall, right, and you start with the foundation, but then you do something, you start punching out some of your blocks, right? Your block wall is going to take a different shape or different function. And so if you have neural pathways that are trying to get to where they're supposed to be, now they have to
Mm-hmm.
take a different route because there's a gap. So if they were supposed to go
Mm.
straight up in their development and there's a gap here because there's this missing piece, now there's no way for them to go. They have to go around it. So that's, so it can damage the structure, and when the structure is damaged, then the functioning is compromised, and even
Right.
the neurons themselves can be damaged in the process. So it's very complicated, very complex,
Very complex.
right?
Yes.
I was
Yes.
trying to,
Yes.
I'm like, I don't want to go too technical into it, but it's like, okay, let's think of this way.
No, it's really helpful actually, because I think when we can understand some of the structural kind of
Mhm.
ideas, we kind of then understand why the functioning happens
Right.
or presents itself in the way that it does. And that the complexity is why, one, it might be difficult to find or diagnose or identify.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, all the things you listed all fall in autism as well, like under that autistic umbrella as well, right? That spectrum. Um, Shannon, what kinds of interventions and supports do you see to be helpful for a little one or someone with FASD in their family, let's say?
Okay. I love that question. And I love that you said your little one, because I want to make sure that everyone understands that FASD is lifelong. It does not go away. It is not curable. It is a lifelong disability that goes throughout the lifespan. So there are adults living with FASD. It does not magically disappear when the child hits junior high or high school or any of those. So I wanted to make sure to state that. So I'm glad you said that, because I was like, yeah, you know. Um, One of the first things is to educate yourself on FASD. I think that there's so much misinformation, or like you said earlier, old information, that we tend to, oh yeah, I know about that, I've heard about that. Or there's the stigma of, oh yes, only alcoholic mothers have kids with FASD, and that is so not true. And I think it's important in supporting a family to, one, educate yourself. Number two, erasing that stigma that's associated with FASD. So, in other words, as a mom of individuals with FASD, a couple of things that were not helpful for me were statements like, oh yeah, well, my kid does that too, and I just, take something away, or I give them a punishment, or things like that. Punishments do not work with this population. They don't understand punishment. And that's not saying consequences can't happen, but punishments are different. And so downplaying what the parent is going through, or labeling the child or the teenager as a rebellious, or pain in the rear, or, oh, they're just defiant, or they have oppositional defiant disorder,
Mm,
which is very common. Um, and that's labeling, and that removing that would be helpful. Offering parents, to learn about their specific child's needs. And then honestly, parents, we need a break. It's exhausting being a parent of an individual with FASD. And not saying that that's against the individual that has that, but
right.
at all. But we are constantly advocating and working with behaviors and helping them with their like, we are all in as parents. And so sometimes we just need a little respite, because we are fully vested in our children. And we are fully vested in our teens and helping them succeed. So we want what's best for them, and we are, I don't want to say tirelessly, because we're tired, but we won't stop because they deserve better, you know? So,
Yeah.
those are certain things: educating yourself, learning how to manage and help that individual, because it is going to be specific for that individual. What may work with my child may not work with your child that has FASD. Your child may be more cognitively advanced than my child, or
Mm-hmm.
your child may be cognitively advanced but have no control of their behaviors, and my child may be perfectly fine on behaviors.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference. um, and then the school systems, helping educate the school systems. Those are some ways. And then another way, again, is to erase the stigma associated with it. I might have mentioned it before, but it's important for us to understand that it's not the person that's the problem, the individual with FASD. It is not the mother that's the problem. It is the alcohol that is the problem. It is the alcohol that created the problem. Okay. Our society is so big on alcohol consumption, and it's just part of our life. And a lot of women don't know they're pregnant for many weeks, right? So
Yeah.
alcohol consumption, it's not
Yeah.
100% preventable. So we need to be able
Yeah.
to say, have that compassion and that empathy that, you know what, it happens. And you might not have known you were pregnant, and now your child is affected. And now the mom will have the guilt potentially, with that. And we need to help
Yeah.
that. We need to help erase that, that's just one of my big things. So,
Yeah. Well, because something that we talk a lot about on this show is really the negative impact of shame.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And shame really is the S word.
Yeah.
It's like it's one of the big S words, right? Like I,
Mhm.
I
Right.
mean, I'd rather use the other one. But shame doesn't
Mhm.
have a place. This is where we are, and this is the kiddo we got.
Mhm. Mhm.
This is the person I am.
Right.
So let's go. Like,
And yeah, and another thing, and if we're talking in the medical profession and the mental health profession, I'm just going to call it out as it is.
call
Okay?
it.
So I'm
Yeah.
calling it. So if I walk in with my child that has been exposed to alcohol, okay,
Mm-hmm.
in utero,
Mm-hmm.
I am more likely to get an autism diagnosis for my child. But if I am a person of color of any sort, or an ethnic or racial minority, my child is going to get labeled with oppositional defiant disorder. And then, therefore,
Mm-hmm.
my treatments and interventions are going to be far different than what I would have received if I'd have walked in as a white person. So I'm just calling it out. And the
Yep.
only reason I say that is because I experienced that specifically, because I was told by a medical professional, well, I can go ahead and give you an autism diagnosis for your child. And that's why I speak that from experience. And I said, absolutely not, because my child does not have autism, right? And the interventions that are going to be effective for individuals with autism are not necessarily going to be effective for individuals with FASD. And this doctor knew that. But, and then yet I have another teenager that has FASD that walked in, and my child is a person of color and got oppositional defiant disorder. Not exaggerating, telling the 100% truth. Fortunately, I was able to remove that diagnosis, but that's speaking from experience. And we need to be careful as professionals and, when we are diagnosing, that we are not labeling and that we really look at the true disability underneath what we're seeing as adverse outcomes. So
Yeah.
I want to call that out, because that's not okay, in
Yeah.
any fashion.
And potentially harmful.
Very
I mean,
harmful.
like, right? Like there's harm that can be done from that. And
Right.
so, we need to take some time to understand why and where and how this,
Yes.
right? So that we can really meet the person where they are.
Right.
Yeah.
And understanding that behavioral modification is not always effective. We're not trying to change the person. We need to, like you said, meet them where they're at and help them with giving them the proper toolkit that they need to go through these, understanding their own brain and understanding their own behaviors, and helping them through that, and not trying to modify them based on compliance. That's not going to help them at all.
I don't know if that just applies to FASD, but we
No.
can apply that to lots of other. But I mean, I think, the point here is, we go back to understanding a person fully and trying to understand a person fully before making judgments and labeling, right? Yeah. And we have to make, I think sometimes as professionals, we want to make some distinctions about what is going to be most effective for this person. And that,
Yes.
Quote unquote, I say that just because sometimes people listen to this just on audio. Bad behavior is communicating something.
Yes.
Right? Maybe it's communicating a lack of skill.
Right.
In an area, right? Maybe it's communicating, I don't have a bigger repertoire to kind of cope with what I'm facing, what I'm feeling, And when we can understand those things, I rarely ever walk away with an OD, an oppositional defiance, or a conduct disorder. And those are used a lot. They are misdiagnosed a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's easy, because when you have that, then you can medicate, or you can do certain interventions that you want to do. And, it's interesting that you had stated bad behavior, but is it really bad?
Right.
Who determined it was bad? Like we are struggling with that. It's like, it's unwanted behaviors. Yeah. So we don't want that behavior, but that doesn't mean it's bad. They're, like you said, they're communicating something. A need is not being met. There's a lack of understanding potentially. And therefore that's the outcome that we're seeing. And we have to be investigators to determine, what's going on. And,
we got to sleuth it. Yep.
Right. It's very helpful for professionals to know if alcohol was consumed during pregnancy. But that's going to be hard for a parent to admit, because there's a lot of fear. Are you going to take my child away? Are you going to stigmatize me? I mean, there's a lot of that, not just shame, but fear in disclosure. And so we have to handle that carefully.
Yeah. And Shannon, I can't even imagine. Like that's another layer that is that talk about something that is laden with shame. 100%. I can see how that would absolutely impact disclosure. Especially in our society, right? Where people are making their own rash judgments about others, right? So it just adds another, there's gotta be, I mean, wow.
You feel the pull. Okay, here's the individual. Why aren't you drinking? Why aren't you drinking? Come on, party with us, or whatever. Or we're at a social function for business. Why not have a glass of wine, right? But wait, you don't know you're pregnant, but then somebody finds out that you drink because you didn't know you're pregnant. But now all this pressure to drink is now changed with, I can't believe you drank during pregnancy, right? Yeah. or just, oh, your baby will turn out fine. There's a lot of OBGYNs in that are giving misinformation. It's okay. Have a glass of wine once a week. It's going to help you. And that is misinformation that is being fed to pregnant women, that it's okay. And it's not. There's no safe amount, timing, or type to consume during pregnancy. And so it's important that medical professionals, OBGYNs, are very aware of this so that they can help educate their population, their clients. And to go along with the stigma associated with it, a lot of persons of color will get educated. And those that are not, it's okay to have a glass of wine. It's okay. So think about that. What's the word I'm looking? There's a word I'm looking for. It's a conflict. It's help me with the word, but you know what I mean. I'm like, there's a word I'm looking for.
In opposition? They're kind of like in opposition to each other.
Right, it's totally conflicting. It's just like, wait a minute, double standard. It's a double standard. That's the word I was looking for. So it's not okay. So we really need to educate ourselves on this and the impacts that it has.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's okay. It's okay. Because obviously, you're in the community, Shannon, and inevitably when we're in the community, we feel things, I think, in a very different way. And so and you're seeing this in the people you support. You're seeing this personally. You're seeing this all over the place.
Yes.
And so you're responding to that. Shannon, what are some things, I can see why someone might be misdiagnosed, right? I mean, I'm looking at, how a kiddo or an individual or a teen, might look like this. And we've got misdiagnoses all over the place anyway, right? And autism, even autism is like really being diagnosed at high frequencies right now too. So I can see how this could be. The danger of that, is that some interventions that might work for one population may not work for another. You had brought up behavior, and you're like, look, punishment is not necessarily an effective, by the way, it's not necessarily an effective strategy, parenting strategy, right? Again, not saying that consequences and rules don't exist. Obviously, they exist and are necessary. But punishment in and of itself is an interesting way to raise children. It's primarily, though, I think it sounds like not effective, and actually harmful for individuals with FASD. What other things have you seen to be like, that might work? Okay, that might work for that population. But if that misdiagnosis happens and now you're in this treatment, boy, I've seen that kind of wreak havoc. Is there something else?
You mean as a positive or ineffective?
Ineffective.
Ineffective would be behavioral modification, such as compliance-based behavioral interventions. Applied behavioral analysis is not effective at all.
Wow. And by the way, that's one of the first things that come right out of the gate. When you have an autism diagnosis, ABA is right around the corner.
Well, and if you think about it, it is behavioral modification. It's modifying the person's behavior. It's compliance-based as opposed to meeting them where they're at. Cognitive behavioral therapy is also not very effective unless specifically adapted to utilize FASD-informed approaches. Yeah. So those are some of the things that are ineffective. But going along with, that sounds so negative. What are some effective strategies? A lot relationship-based, strength-based. Some other effective strategies are, thinking that brain first, that brain, not behavior. Always thinking brain, because that's where it's at. In that moment, where is my child's brain right now? My child is about to do whatever. Okay. My child does not, what is it? My child does not feel safe. Okay, maybe that's it. My child is overwhelmed. And by child, I mean teen as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
We changed up
Yep.
the transition plan. Okay. My student was going to class and I interrupted their beeline and said, so and so needs to see you in the office. Whoa, what's going to happen? Right. But we just go about our day and think that that's a normal thing. Um, like I said, strength-based approach. And just remembering it's a physical disability. We may not be able to see it, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
physical disability. Um, and if we think of it that way and we think of, okay, if I were to look at you and you had a wheelchair, I would automatically make accommodations for you, correct? Why are we not doing that for the individual that doesn't have the wheelchair? We make
Yeah.
accommodations for a person who is blind. We make accommodations for a person who, is hard of hearing. Why are we so stigmatizing this population? Because we can't see it. And
Yeah.
it's important that we think brain first and then move from there. Okay, and we have to be the detectives. What is going on in the environment? What is happening? Communicate. What do you need right now? It could be as simple as I need a snack and my brain is out of control. Oh,
Yeah.
great. Have a cheese stick. Let's move on. It can be
Yeah.
that simple. Stare us right in the face.
Yep.
And
Yep. No, I love that. I love that. Shannon, how is when for school districts and like I'm in the state of California, so regional center, to
mhm.
qualify for supports and services, you have to fall under certain categories.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering where FASD is in that identification. So
Mhm.
my question really is how accessible are services and supports for this population?
Well, that is such a hard question to answer because, for example, in the state of California, I'm in the state of California as well. Regional centers, you have to have one of 4/5 categories. There is a fifth
Mm-hmm.
category,
Yes.
and that is typically where FASD falls. However, it is very commonly dismissed from regional centers because they don't fall into the other categories. They may not have an intellectual disability because the standard range is like 74 or 72 to like 120. So,
Mhm.
intelligence wise, IQ is not a measurement, yet they use it. And yeah, right. It just happens. And so there's a very big pull to for regional centers to start helping individuals with FASD, although it has not happened yet. Um,
Okay.
Now, in the state of California, in the education system, recently in January, Education Code 56332, I finally remembered the number, went into place as a law that FASD is now qualifying category under OHI, under other health impairment.
Okay.
So,
Wait,
yeah,
Shannon.
teachers and staff need to be educated.
So Shannon. Okay. So we've got a neurological condition,
Yes.
a brain-based
Yes.
condition,
Yes.
i.e., ergo, not voluntary, not choice, not
Correct.
I won't. Okay, I'm just gonna say,
Yes, ma'am.
which we can see in similar ways as visual impairments, hearing impairments, autism, even ADHD falls under OHI. Okay, and FASD just got recognized.
Right? Yes, ma'am. And it was discovered way back in the 70s,
Right. That's
right?
what. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
But let's call this one out too. Is
Okay.
it would not be necessary to recognize if the proper supports were already in place for their needs, right? And it's
Yeah.
just been missed. And it's no fault of anyone. It's just there's been so much new research and there's been so much misunderstandings in the past that, they're just now coming to this point. So, yeah, it just now happened in the state of California. And there's only like 3 or 4 states in the entire United States that will recognize it as a disability in special education. We are so far
Oh
to go.
my gosh. This diagnosis is like a baby. I
Yeah.
mean, seriously,
Mhm.
the impairments and the challenges are global.
Yes.
These are global impairments. Like
Right.
I'm impacted. I might not be impacted in some ways like others, but my brain is impacted.
Right. FASD affects everyone in some aspect or another, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in the fact that the prevalence is 1 in 20. That is higher than autism, higher than Down syndrome and cerebral palsy. Yes. 1 in
1 in
20,
20?
2 to 5% of the population. That is correct. Maybe we should have started with that,
Oh
but
my
yeah,
gosh.
yes.
I had no idea that was the prevalence.
Yes. In 2018, a JAMA article came out where they did a research study, and it was actually a conservative effort that possibly 1 in 20 have FASD. So then the common question is, well, great, then we all could possibly have FASD. You're right. And then I get, well, what's the difference? Why are we suddenly dealing with it now? And my own opinion, and I'm going to say my opinion, is
Mhm.
back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s, our education system looked very different. And those who had neurodiverse conditions were actually celebrated for their differences. There were opportunities to do machine shop and mechanical, automotive, or home economics, or cosmetology. These types of things were offered in the schools. So those who were not sit in your chair and learn academics
Mhm.
could do something else to their strength and be celebrated for it, and then created a career from it. And we've lost that. And because the focus was so on academics and the swing, I think it happened like in the 80s or something. And it was like, you need to have a degree in this in order to be successful. And we changed our perspective. But that doesn't mean that we weren't affected by it back then. We just know about it more, and our interventions have changed. We've thought, oh, we're going to change it this way. So that's just my opinion. It's not fact. It's not research based. It's not evidence based. It's nothing. But I thought about that one time, and I thought, if the schools could, and it's not all the schools, even as a parent, if I can celebrate that difference
Mhm.
and cater to that more so than you have to know the quadratic equation in order
Yep.
to graduate. So
Yeah.
those types of things. We have to shift our thinking again. We have to shift the paradigm. So
Yeah.
there's my little
Yeah.
teaching moment, my opinion.
I mean, I love it. I mean, this is so necessary. We think about where awareness of FASD is today. There's
Mhm.
more work to be done. There's actually a lot of work to be done.
There's
And
a lot of work.
so, yeah, I mean, from an educational standpoint, from a societal standpoint, just understanding this. Shannon, what is the best way for someone to explore if FASD is a diagnosis? Like, what would if someone's questioning that, let's say,
Okay.
what's the process of confirming it?
Yeah, that's a great question. The only way that a diagnosis of FASD is going to be done is confirmation of alcohol consumption during pregnancy. Now,
Okay.
that does not mean that it has to come from the the mother or the biological parent. It could be,
Okay.
you know what, Gwen, I'm your best friend, and I noticed that you consumed alcohol. So yeah, she did consume alcohol during pregnancy. It could be an aunt or a relative, just a confirmation. It doesn't have to, you don't have to disclose that, oh yeah, this person had, did binge drinking episodes or anything like that.
Yep.
But the confirmation needs to happen. And that's the signal for the doctors, the medical professionals, to dig deeper and do the assessments and see what potential brain functions may have been impacted.
Got it.
So if you're another a way, if you're a parent and you're struggling with different things, if you start to see what they call the alphabet soup of diagnoses, that's a red flag. So my child has ADHD and anxiety and depression and, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You might want to like dig a little deeper, and see, oh,
Yeah.
is this potentially, and then lastly, I mean, not lastly, but regardless of FASD, FASD currently is not a diagnosis in the United States. It is not a recognized diagnosis. A diagnosis will be, like we talked about before, ARND, NDPAE, and those types of diagnoses will take place. You will not necessarily get an FASD diagnosis. It's not recognized in the United States yet. So other countries have recognized it as a diagnosis. And then we have to understand that the individual, not the child, but the individual is much more than their diagnosis.
Of course. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, Shannon, if someone's listening to this, oh my, so much. It's so good. If someone's listening to this and they're like, I need to contact Shannon. What's the best way for someone to get a hold of you, Shannon, if they had any questions or they might need some guidance or some help?
Yes, I would love to help. I'd love to help parents with parenting techniques and things that are helpful. You can reach me and teachers and educators as well. I have a website called Embracing the Brain. So you can just go embracingthebrain.com, or you can email me at shannon@embracingthebrain.com.
Awesome. Shannon, thank you so much for coming on, for dropping wisdom. Oh my gosh, I learned a ton myself, and I needed this the software update in my head. I love it. Thanks, Shannon. Thank you so much, and thanks for being a part of the neurodiverse community and just wanting to raise the tides, right? So I appreciate that too. All right, thanks, Shannon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.